A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And you're listening to another episode of Coaster Kings A through Z, our weekly Minisode series. This week's letter is P for Python, located at the Efteling at the Netherlands, Kaatsheuvel.
Kaatsheuvel.
Over een lengte van bijna 750 meter raast een slangachtig treintje met 28 passagiers over de baan, waarbij onder andere 2 complete loopings worden gemaakt. De wervelende rit duurt ruim 2 minuten, waarin de passagiers de wereld op zijn kop te zien krijgen.
Python is designed and manufactured by Vekoma, the Dutch manufacturer we love so dearly. And it opened on April 12th of 1981 as the largest steel coaster in Europe. And when I say it was a big deal for the country, it was a big deal for the country.
Yes.
Like, it is a legend.
Iconic.
Python is a legend.
Which is why they went through the trouble of retracking it, of course. But we'll get to that later. Python, or Python as it is pronounced in Dutch, was the first thrill ride that Efteling built after almost 30 years of the park focusing pretty much exclusively on walkthroughs, gardens, and gentle rides. Efteling was not really famous for anything except for like their fairy tale forest, and then they started
and being just kind of like a nature, what we call Wandel Park, which is kind of like a park to just walk around in to enjoy fresh air. That's kind of what the park was really known for, and Python was kind of a stretch in a different direction.
Shift,
But it really did pay off for them. Python's double loop, double corkscrew layout was based on the Carolina Cyclone layout from Carowinds, which was designed by Aerodynamics, a company with whom Vekoma had entered a partnership to broaden their international fulfillment and capacity. In other words, Aero had a hard time selling in the European market, especially due to like shipping costs and shipping overseas. Obviously, manufacturing on the west coast of the U.S., it was quite a distance. So they had more luck in Japan than they had in Europe. So to kind of get the ball rolling there, Vekoma actually was allowed to use their track type and manufacture attractions, coasters. And then they will provide the trains. So the first rolling stock on Python were aerodynamic trains.
Yeah, the first of 4 rolling stocks.
So 4 sets of rolling stock.
4 sets of rolling stock, along with the Carolina Cyclone and the Orient Express at Worlds of Fun, Python held the global inversion record until the opening of Viper at Darien Lake in 1982 with 5 inversions. And it broke the European record for inversions, which it held with a growing number of 4 inversion coasters across the country until the opening of the 7 inversion Culturix at Park Asterix in 1989, also built by Vekoma and one of our favorite coasters.
Now you may kind of wonder what the stats are on Python. So Python is 750 meters long, which equates to 2,460 feet. It's 29 meters tall, which is 95 feet tall. Reaches a top speed of 75 kilometers an hour, which is 46.6 miles an hour. And the ride's original track and trains were designed by Aero, like we kind of mentioned already, with Vekoma handling the ride's overall design and construction. Since then they got the Vekoma MK1200 rolling stock. Then they've got the Kumbak, which is also a Dutch company, rolling stock, which kind of came along the same time period of them designing the Vliegende Hollander, which is also designed by Kumbak. And then they switched over to the new MK1212 trains, the lovely ones with Vesper trains that they currently still run, even after they completely rebuilt the ride earlier or like later in the last decade.
A Belgian company came in because Vekoma was booked up. They wanted Vekoma to come and retrack the ride, or at least the majority of the ride, to prolong the ride's service life, but they were not available because we all know what a hot commodity Vekoma is. So that first generation, they had the Aero trains and then the Vekoma MK1200s, if you're not familiar. Those are the second generation of Vekoma-built, Vekoma-designed trains. You would find those got really popular in the 90s, like when Six Flags was dropping boomerang coasters everywhere. Like, those are the trains that you would find. Like, all of the late 90s, early 2000s Vekoma boomerangs had MK1200. Like, all the Beetlebug trains, because the noses kind of remind me of, like, a Volkswagen Beetle. So they ran with those for a little bit. The Kumbak trains looked really cool. They had kind of like a...
Yeah, they could also be found on Sea Viper over at Gold Coast in Australia's SeaWorld.
Well, not anymore.
Well, they said they could... they were found around the same time. Like, they could be found.
They could have... Okay, got you.
Because there was only 2 sets of them.
No, Sea Viper
They did definitely look really, really cool.
They
looked really sleek. Something you'd kind of think a manufacturer maybe released now. because they really did look
They were
very
ahead of their time,
postmodern.
for sure.
And then, of course, in 2018, it's when the Belgian company came in and replaced all the track. Now, what did happen is they did have to remove quite some landscaping, because over the years, of course, since 1981, Python kind of was built into a forest.
Trees grew in quite.
They had to remove all of that,
yeah.
so Python was very exposed again in 2018. The track kind of looks like a snake skeleton. Some people kind of refer to
like
it.
a spinal.
It's definitely a different, really robust, bulky track, but it looks really clean. It's so utterly smooth.
There's nothing like it. That track bed is so unique.
It's smoother than the
so
B&M.
smooth and pleasant.
And I think it's one of the smoothest coasters in the world right now. It's so precisely manufactured, and they worked out some of the kinks. So after the loop, it used to be kind of like you go up a little bit, and then you would dive into that turn, which kind of give you maybe a headbang, and then you would go into the corkscrews. And of course, traditionally, all eras in Vekomas, when you go into the corkscrew, is a little bit of a weird transition, where the track is kind of like sits sideways for a quick moment. That was all worked out, and it's just a lot more smooth of a layout now, despite, of course, it having the same elements. It used the same footers, which means the new supports are really wild. It's almost like a premiere kind of like spaghetti bowl support situation.
It did some really funny things with the supports to accommodate the existing footer footprint.
But overall, I do enjoy being able to see the ride now. It has a much more of a presence. It's no longer quite as hidden. And from the ride station, for example, you get an awesome view now of Vliegende Hollander off in the distance, Baron kind of sticking out over the water, and of course Joris and the Draak, the triple up, triple down, whatever you want to call that, the triple hills coming towards you. You can all see that from the station now, so it's a little more involved in the area now, I think. Now I think it's a little more bare.
It's such a pretty ride. Like, when you go through the trouble to do that, and the track style is so aesthetically pleasing, and it has such a nice clean white paint job. Like, you want to see it anyway. Like, it's always kind of a pity to lose trees, but first of all, they'll grow back. It's not of all, the ride looks really nice, and when you go through an investment like that, that's a multi-million-dollar investment. It's like practically a new roller coaster. It's in your best interest for it to be visible.
Totally. And one thing I still really appreciate about Efteling and its park goers is the love for Python. It's so one of those rides. It's so immensely popular. It just burns into the culture. Everyone's mother and at this point grandparents have ridden Python and talk about it. And it's just one of those things like you can't go to the Efteling and not ride it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a household name. It's a conversation piece. The amount of kids I knew throughout my school time that would just bring up Python just like casually, and like their parents would talk about it. It's just a legend for Europe, and especially for the Netherlands. It's one of those cult classics. And even when we were there over the last couple of years, every time we rode it, there was always these people talking about it, how they like it better than Baron. Even though, of course, Baron is a big thrill ride. Really, Python still stands its ground, which is kind of rare. I don't think there's many classic loopers from that time period where the general public is still so fascinated with it. And I think that's why, like you kind of mentioned, that's why they spend so much money on rebuilding it. And like the 4 rolling stocks, I mean, this is by far, for the size of a looper that it is, by far the coaster in the world that has had the most money put into it.
This ride is so fussed over with all the train changes and the track bed change, and like Americans watching this happen are like, gosh, like why are they're so fussed over this kind of basic coaster? But you can't understand unless you live there and grew up with it. Like, that ride is so revered, even though it's a pretty simple ride. It doesn't matter.
But again, I mean, there was 8 years in which this was, and especially around the Coast of War times, it's quite unique that for 8 years long, this was Europe's biggest, baddest roller coaster. Hidden in Kaatsheuvel. And then finally Goederix, which was obviously, as we have actually mentioned in an earlier episode of the season, kind of the precursor, the big move to prevent Disney's success in a way, to launch Parc Asterix into the stratosphere, which then indirectly, killed Mirapolis, which had a really similar coaster.
It was based on Python.
Which is based on Python. So, like, in a way, Goederix really was the next step up. And for those 8 years, Python ruled Europe, and I think it's a beautiful story.
Yeah, and it's still a great ride after 41 years.
Absolutely amazing.
And you have it tattooed on your ankle.
And that's my ankle, because
it's important.
It's an important coaster.
It is part of your identity.
It's part of my identity.
Your Dutch heritage.
And I figured if I have Viper, I might as well also get another snake. So now I have 2 snake tattoos,
coasters,
which are both coaster tattoos, so that's kind of fun.
What a vibe.
But that rounds up this episode. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel. We now have a weekly video going live, vlogs on rides, all that kind of good stuff. Of course, we have all of our episodes, Coaster Kings A through Z. We're now at P, so I guess we got a couple letters left. So make sure you tune in every Monday for that. And then we have our weekly episodes on Thursdays. and lots of content on thecoasterkings.com. Wherever you're listening, please leave us a review for Coaster Kings Radio. We can really use the exposure, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.